The corset laces cut into Genevieve Hartwell's ribs like piano wire. She stood perfectly still in the dressing room of Grace Church, her breath coming shallow while the maid pulled tighter. Tighter still. The mirror showed what no one else could see. Purple bruises bloomed across her ribcage like storm clouds. 4 days old. The shape of fingers. Sterling Vandermeer's fingers. The maid's hands hesitated at the discoloration. "Miss Hartwell, perhaps we should loosen." "No." Genevieve's voice came out steady. "Practiced. It needs to be perfect." Because in 20 minutes she would walk down that aisle and marry a man she had never met. A man who believed she was hideous. A man who needed her father's money so desperately he had agreed to take a bride sight unseen. The irony tasted like copper in her mouth. The maid draped the veil over Genevieve's dark auburn hair. Not the delicate lace most brides wore. This was different. Thick, layered, heavy enough to hide secrets. The fabric fell past her waist like a shroud, obscuring even the outline of her face. Through it, the world became shadow and suggestion. Genevieve touched the veil with careful fingers. This lie had kept her alive for 2 years. The rumor of scars, the whisper of disfigurement, a childhood fire that never happened, a tragedy that protected her better than any lock or key. She had learned something important in those 2 years. Men did not hunt what they could not see, did not want what they believed was already broken. The door opened. Her father entered, James Hartwell, dressed in his finest suit, the railroad fortune written in every expensive stitch. He looked at his daughter with eyes that calculated value the way other men calculated love. "Ready?" he asked. Genevieve turned from the mirror. Through the veil, she studied the man who had built an empire but could not protect his own child. The man who had chosen this origin, marriage to a bankrupt aristocrat, a trade of money for name safety for status. "Yes," she said, because ready or not, Sterling Vandermeer was somewhere in New York City right now. And when he discovered she had married without his permission, without his control, he would come for her. This wedding was not romance. It was war, by another name. Thaddeus Beaumont stood at the altar of Grace Church and tried not to think about the auction notice hidden in his prayer book. 30 days. That was all the time he had left before creditors would descend on Beaumont estate like vultures on a carcass. 30 days before 300 years of family legacy would be sold piece by piece to the highest bidder. The furniture his grandfather had imported from France. The paintings his great-grandmother had commissioned. The land itself. All of it. Gone. Unless he went through with this. The church smelled of lilies and old wood and the kind of money that could save everything. 400 guests filled the pews. New York society, dressed in silk and judgment, their eyes sharp with gossip. They had not come to celebrate. They had come to watch a duke kneel to a railroad baron's coin, to see how far the mighty could fall. Thad kept his face blank. Aristocratic. The mask he had learned to wear since his father's death 3 years ago, since he had opened the estate books and discovered the truth. His father had not just been a drunk. He had been a gambler, a borrower, a man who had mortgaged the future to pay for the past. The debts had come due. And now Thad stood here about to marry a woman whose face he had never seen. A woman the whispers called damaged, scarred, hidden away by her father for years because no man would want her. Part of him felt sick about it, the cold transaction of it all. But another part, the practical part that had kept the estate from collapsing entirely, felt almost relieved. If she was truly disfigured, it would be easier. Easier to keep his distance. Easier to maintain the walls he had built around anything that felt like want. This would be business. Clean, simple. He would provide her with a name. She would provide him with money. They would live separate lives under the same roof. No complications, no feelings, no risk. The organ began. Every head in the church turned toward the entrance. The great doors opened, and there she was. Genevieve Hartwell walked down the aisle on her father's arm with a kind of deliberate grace that made Thad's stomach tighten. Her dress was white satin, expensive, but understated. But the veil, God, the veil. It hung from her head like curtains drawn over a window no one was meant to see through. Dense lace layered so thick that not even a shadow of her features showed. No hint of her nose, no suggestion of her mouth, just white fabric and mystery. The guests whispered. The sound moved through the pews like wind through leaves. Poor creature. The scarred bride. Beaumont must be desperate. Thad forced himself to watch her approach, to keep his breathing even. She moved neither quickly nor slowly. Each step measured, controlled. like a woman walking to her execution who had decided not to give her executioners the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. Something about that bothered him. He had expected timidity, shame, the hunched shoulders of someone trying to disappear. This woman walked like she owned the aisle she traveled. When she reached the altar, she released her father's arm and turned to face Thad. They stood 2 feet apart, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Not the heavy florals most society women wore. Something cleaner, sharper, like winter mornings and pine. The priest began the ceremony, words about love and honor and cherishing. Pretty lies dressed up in Latin and tradition. Thad barely heard them. His attention kept catching on the woman beside him. On the way, she stood so still. On the way, her hands visible beneath the veil's edge were steady when his own wanted to shake. He had promised himself he would feel nothing during this. But standing beside her, he felt something anyway. Not attraction, not yet. Something stranger. Curiosity mixed with a thread of unease. Like standing at the edge of a frozen lake and wondering how deep the water ran beneath. The priest turned to him. "Do you, Thaddeus Ambrose Beaumont, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Thad's throat was dry. He forced the words out clearly, firmly, as if certainty could make them true. "I do." The priest turned to Genevieve. "Do you, Genevieve Marie Hartwell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Her voice came through the veil, soft but distinct. No tremor, no hesitation. "I will." Not "I do." "I will." The choice of words hit Thad oddly, like a promise and a warning wrapped together. The priest smiled, pleased that the ritual was progressing smoothly. "You may now lift the veil and kiss your bride." The church went silent. Every guest leaned forward slightly in their seats. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The reveal, the confirmation of the rumors they had spread. Thad's hands rose. His fingers found the edge of the veil. The lace felt expensive beneath his touch. Silk-lined, the kind of thing meant to make poverty look like choice. He hesitated, just for a heartbeat, just long enough to think one last coherent thought. If she is truly disfigured, I can survive this. If she is not, he lifted the veil. Light fell across her face and Thaddeus Beaumont forgot how to breathe. The woman standing before him was not scarred. She was not damaged. She was not hidden for kindness. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Dark auburn hair fell in soft waves around a face that belonged in paintings. Pale skin with a touch of warmth beneath, like cream touched by candlelight. High cheekbones, a mouth the color of roses. But it was her eyes that struck him like a physical blow. Green. Forest dark green, the kind of green that held secrets and would not let them go easily. She stared back at him with those eyes. Calm, steady, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. As if she had planned every second of his shock. And then she smiled. Not a shy bride's smile, not demure or sweet. A knowing smile. The smile of a woman who had just won a hand of cards she had stacked herself. The church erupted in gasps. Women clutched their fans. Men leaned to whisper. Somewhere in the front pew, a society matron said too loudly, "Good God." Thad's knees went weak. Actually weak. He caught himself before anyone noticed, but he felt it. The loss of control. The shift beneath his feet, because this changed everything. This was not what he had agreed to. This was not what he had prepared for. This was not safe. The priest cleared his throat, clearly confused by the pause. "Your Grace, you may kiss the bride." Thad's mouth opened, but no words came. His mind was screaming at him. Dozens of questions. Why had she hidden? Why the rumors? What was happening? Genevieve tilted her head slightly. Her smile stayed in place. Quiet, precise in its cruelty. Like a blade hidden in silk. She leaned forward, just enough that her lips nearly touched his ear, just enough that no one else could hear. "Now you understand," she whispered. His pulses slammed in his ears. "Understand what?" "That you married me blind." Her breath was warm against his skin. "And you will regret it." Then before he could respond, she pressed something small into his palm. Folded paper, hidden from the watching crowd. She pulled back slightly, met his eyes, dared him. The entire church was watching, waiting for the kiss that would seal this catastrophe. Thad leaned forward like a man moving through deep water. Like every instinct was screaming at him to step back, but momentum carried him forward anyway. His lips touched hers. The kiss was brief, proper. What a church wedding demanded. But her hand tightened on his where she had pressed the note. And in that pressure, he felt it. The warning, the promise. This woman had not come to him weak. She had come armed. When they pulled apart, Genevieve turned to face the congregation. Her expression transformed instantly. The knowing smile became something softer, sweeter, the perfect duchess. She looked like every society painting of feminine grace, but Thad could still feel the folded paper burning against his palm. And he knew, with a certainty that made his chest tight, this marriage was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of his undoing. The wedding breakfast was held at Hartwell House, a massive mansion on Fifth Avenue that announced wealth so loudly it might as well have had trumpets. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted to look like European frescoes. Tables groaned under the weight of food that could have fed a small town. Champagne flowed like water, and everywhere guests laughed too loudly, drank too freely, pretending this was a love match instead of what it actually was. Commerce dressed up as romance. Thad sat at the head table, his new wife beside him, and felt the note in his pocket like a burning coal. He had not yet had a chance to read it. Every time he tried to slip away, someone else appeared. A toast, a congratulation, another hollow smile. Genevieve played her part flawlessly. She greeted elderly aunts with perfect courtesy. She spoke to business associates with polite interest. She smiled at compliments about her beauty as if hearing them for the first time. Watching her was like watching a performance so skilled, it became unsettling. Every gesture calculated, every word chosen. She fit into this world of society and manners like she had been born to it. But she had not been born to it. That much Thad knew. James Hartwell had built his fortune from nothing. Railroad money, new money, the kind that bought houses but not bloodlines, which meant Genevieve had learned this, taught herself to become what these people expected. The question was why. If her father had kept her hidden for years, where had she practiced this performance? Silas Brennan, Thad's closest friend, leaned over during a lull in the toasts. "You look like you swallowed glass," he murmured. Thad kept his eyes forward. "Eat your salmon." "That bad?" Thad did not answer, could not answer. Because how did he explain the wedding was supposed to be simple? Mercenary but simple. Now he was sitting next to a woman who had orchestrated an elaborate deception, and he had no idea why. Across the table, James Hartwell rose with his champagne glass. The room quieted. "To my daughter," Hartwell said, his voice carrying the practiced boom of a man used to boardrooms, "and to her new husband, may their marriage be long, prosperous, and fruitful." Glasses raised, cheers echoed. Genevieve lifted her champagne and drank, her eyes meeting Thad's only once. In that glance, he felt it again. Not fear, challenge. The breakfast dragged on, course after course, toast after toast. By the time the guests began filtering toward the ballroom for dancing, Thad's patience had worn to a thread. He needed to read that note, needed to understand what he had walked into. He slipped away to a quiet corridor, away from the music and laughter, found a spot near a window where he could stand in shadow. His fingers shook slightly as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was elegant, precise. "Mr. Beaumont, this marriage will save you from bankruptcy, but it will not save you from me. Clause 9 in our marriage contract is real and legally binding. If you attempt to hide me, silence me, or treat me as a purchased object, I will claim full control of your remaining liquid assets for my protection. We will speak privately tonight. Do not make me use what I have earned. G. Beaumont." She had already signed her new name. Thad read the note 3 times. The words did not change. His breathing came faster. Clause 9. What the hell was Clause 9? The marriage contract had been 47 pages of legal language. He had skimmed most of it, although his lawyer had assured him it was standard, usual protections, normal terms. Had they missed something? Or had his lawyer been so desperate for the Hartwell money that he had overlooked a trap? Footsteps approached. Thad shoved the note into his pocket and turned. James Hartwell stood in the corridor, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Enjoying the party?" Hartwell asked mildly. Thad's jaw tightened. "You lied. About her face, the rumors, all of it." Hartwell smiled, not apologetic, not cruel, just knowing. "I never said my daughter was disfigured, Mr. Beaumont. Society said that. I simply chose not to correct them. You let people call her a monster. I let people underestimate her." Hartwell stepped closer. His voice dropped. "There is a difference. One that you will learn, I think." Thad's hands curled into fists at his sides. "What is Clause 9? For the first time, something flickered in Hartwell's eyes. Not surprise. Satisfaction. "Ah, she told you. What is it?" Hartwell pulled a cigar from his jacket, did not light it, just held it between his fingers like a prop. "A protection measure. If you abandon my daughter, attempt to institutionalize her, or keep her isolated from society against her will, she gains legal control of 60% of your liquid assets. It was my lawyer's suggestion. Your lawyer agreed. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Thad's feet. That's legal, binding, and very much in effect. You trapped me. No, Hartwell's voice hardened. I protected my daughter. There is a difference, though many men fail to see it. Thad wanted to grab the man by his expensive collar, wanted to demand answers. Why the deception? Why the claws? Why any of this? But Hartwell spoke first. A word of advice, Mr. Beaumont. My daughter is not fragile. She is not a girl to be handled like glass or locked in a tower for her own good. If you try to treat her as one, you will discover what she is truly capable of. Is that a threat? Hartwell smiled again. That same knowing smile his daughter had worn at the altar. A suggestion, from one businessman to another. He turned and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving Thad alone in the corridor with a burning note in his pocket and the growing realization that he had not bought himself a quiet wife. He had bought himself a war. The carriage to Beaumont Estate was large enough for a duchess. Velvet seats, brass fixtures, windows curtained against the autumn cold. Genevieve sat across from Thad, hands folded in her lap, watching the city slip away into countryside. The sun was setting, painting everything golden red. They had been riding in silence for 20 minutes. Thad could not stop staring at her. At the face that should have been scarred but was not. At the calm expression that gave away nothing. She looked out the window as if they were on a pleasant afternoon ride instead of heading toward a confrontation that felt inevitable. Finally, he broke. You planned this. Genevieve turned from the window. Yes. The note, the clause, all of it. Yes. Why? Her emerald eyes studied him, measuring, deciding how much truth he could handle. Because, she said slowly, you would have tried to control me otherwise. Men like you always do. You don't know me. I know what people say. Her voice was soft but steady. Thaddeus Beaumont, cold, proud, a man who can turn his back on anyone, even his own heart. The words landed like stones, because they were not entirely wrong. After his father's death, after discovering the wreckage of lies and debt, Thad had made himself hard, had built walls between himself and anything that felt like vulnerability. It had been survival, protection. But hearing it said aloud in that calm voice made it sound like something worse. And what do they say about you, he asked. The real you, not the scarred girl, not the hidden daughter. Who are you actually? Something flickered across Genevieve's face. So brief he almost missed it. Pain, maybe, or memory. They say nothing, she answered, because my father kept me hidden. And now people will watch me like a curiosity, a puzzle to solve, a scandal to whisper about. You could have refused the marriage. Genevieve laughed, short, sharp. Could I? My father's fortune bought your title. Your debts bought my escape. We both walked into this cage, Mr. Beaumont. The only difference is that I brought the key. The carriage hit a rut. They both swayed slightly. Escape from what? Thad asked quietly. Her expression shuddered. You will learn tonight, as I wrote. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. Thad tried to organize his thoughts, tried to plan, but every strategy felt inadequate against a woman who had already outmaneuvered him before he even knew the game had started. When Beaumont Estate finally rose from the darkening landscape, Thad felt something twist in his chest. Home, or what was left of it. The old stone mansion stood 3 stories tall, weathered and proud against the autumn sky. The west wing showed its age in cracked mortar and faded paint. The gardens had grown wild in places, but the bones were still good, still strong. 300 years of family history, of births and deaths and seasons, of duty passed from father to son. And now he had gambled it all on a marriage to a woman who looked at him like an adversary. The carriage stopped. Servants lined up outside the entrance, a dozen people who depended on this estate for their livelihoods. Mrs. Caldwell, the housekeeper, stood at the front, her gray hair pulled back severely, her mouth a thin line of judgment. Thad stepped out first, then offered his hand to Genevieve. She took it. Her fingers were warm despite the cold air. The servants bowed and curtsied as Genevieve approached. She smiled at each one, learned their names, spoke with a grace that seemed genuine. Mrs. Caldwell's expression remained skeptical, but she curtsied properly. Welcome to Beaumont Estate, Mrs. Beaumont. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. Genevieve's voice held authority without arrogance. I hope we will work well together. Something in the housekeeper's eyes shifted. Not approval exactly, but perhaps the beginning of respect. Inside the entrance hall smelled of wood smoke and old polished floors. Portraits of Beaumont ancestors lined the walls, watching with painted eyes as this stranger entered their domain. Genevieve looked up at them, studied each face. "They're judging me," she said quietly. "They judge everyone," Thad replied. "Good, then I'm in appropriate company." Despite everything, despite the anger and confusion, Thad almost smiled. Mrs. Caldwell showed them to their chambers. The ducal bedroom suite, massive, high ceilings, a fireplace large enough to stand in, and a bed that looked like it belonged to royalty. One bed, because of course there was only one bed. Mrs. Caldwell dismissed herself with a pointed look that said she did not approve but would not interfere. The door closed, and suddenly Thad and Genevieve were alone for the first time since the altar. She walked to the fireplace warming her hands, still in her wedding dress. Still looking like something from a portrait herself, Thad stood near the door, every muscle tense. "So," he said, "the truth, now." Genevieve turned to face him. The firelight caught in her hair made her eyes look darker. She took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. "There is a man in New York. His name is Sterling Vandermeer." Thad frowned. "The Wall Street banker." "Yes, he hunts women the way other men hunt foxes." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Explain," Thad said. And she did. She told him about the charity event 2 years ago, the one time her father had brought her out into society, how Sterling Vandermeer had seen her across a ballroom and decided she would be his, how he had sent letters, gifts, messages through intermediaries, how her father had refused them all. But Vandermeer had not stopped. He had escalated. "He cornered me once," Genevieve said, her voice flat now like she was reciting facts from a ledger. "At a house party in the Berkshires. My father was playing cards 3 rooms away. Vandermeer found me in a hallway, told me exactly what he wanted. Not marriage, ownership." Thad's hands curled into fists. "Did he touch me?" "That time, no, I got away. Told my father." Her jaw tightened. "My father did not believe me, said I must have misunderstood, that a man of Vandermeer's standing would never behave so crudely." The anger in Thad's chest grew hotter. Genevieve continued. "After that, Vandermeer changed tactics. He started spreading rumors. Not about my face, about my virtue. He hinted that I was loose, that I had invited his attention, that I had asked for it. Bastard. He was careful, always careful, never anything that could be proven. Just whispers, suggestions, enough to make people doubt, to make my father feel pressured." She looked directly at Thad. "He wanted my father to feel forced to accept him, to save my reputation." "So you made a different reputation first," Thad said slowly. Understanding dawning. "Yes, I created the scar rumor, fed it to society gossips through paid intermediaries. Let them build the story themselves. The tragic fire, the hidden daughter, the father's shame." Her voice was bitter. "It worked. The invitations stopped. The men stopped pursuing, and Vandermeer moved on. For a while, but men like Sterling Vandermeer do not stop hunting. They only pause. Pawns." She crossed her arms, a gesture that looked like protection. "When your name came to our door, I saw an opportunity. A duke, a title, a shield strong enough that even Vandermeer would hesitate." Thad stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the story she was telling. "And Clause 9, insurance in case you turned out to be like my father, in case you decided hiding me was easier than protecting me." Her chin lifted. "I will not be caged again, Mr. Beaumont. Not even in a gilded one." The room was very quiet, just the crackle of the fire and the sound of their breathing. Thad should have been angry, should have felt manipulated, trapped, used. And he did feel those things. But beneath them deeper, he felt something else, something uncomfortably close to admiration. This woman had been hunted by a predator, had been disbelieved by her own father, and instead of breaking, she had built a strategy. Created a fortress out of lies and legal clauses. She had saved herself. "What happens when Vandermeer discovers you've married?" Thad asked. Genevieve's expression went hard. "He will come for me. He always does. The question is what you will do when he arrives." Thad moved then, crossed the distance between them until he stood close enough to see the flecks of gold hidden in her green eyes, close enough to smell that winter pine scent. "I am not your father," he said quietly. "And I am not a man who abandons his responsibilities. I am not your responsibility. I am your wife. There is a difference." "Then what do you want from me?" "Stand with me," she said simply. "When Vandermeer comes, when society gossips, When the world tries to put me back in whatever cage they think I belong in, just stand with me. It was the first thing she had asked that sounded like a request instead of a demand. Thad studied her face. This woman who had planned and plotted and protected herself in the only ways available. This woman who had married a stranger to escape a monster. All right, he said. Genevieve blinked. All right, I'll stand with you. But Genevieve, he let her name sit between them for a moment. No more secrets. If we're going to face this together, I need to know everything. For a long moment, she just looked at him, weighing, deciding. Then she nodded. No more secrets. She moved to the vanity, began removing the pins from her hair. The auburn waves fell loose around her shoulders. She caught his eye in the mirror. There is one more thing you should know, she said. What? Sterling Vandermeer is not just wealthy. He's connected. Judges, police, politicians. He owns pieces of half the legal system in New York City. Thad's stomach sank. So even if he commits a crime, it disappears like all the others. She turned from the mirror. That is why I needed more than just escape. I needed protection that even his connections could not touch. A duke's name, a duke's standing. And if that is not enough, her smile was sharp, cold. Then we find another way to destroy him. The words hung in the air between them. Not romantic, not gentle, but honest in a way that felt almost intimate. Thad realized something then. Something that shifted his understanding of everything. This woman was not asking to be saved. She was asking for an ally in a war she had been fighting alone. And despite the deception, despite the manipulation, despite every rational reason to resent her, he found himself willing to be that ally. We should sleep, Genevieve said, turning toward the massive bed. Tomorrow will bring its own complications. Thad looked at the bed, then at her. I can sleep in the chair. She paused. Why, Pierre? Because whatever this marriage is, I will not force. I know. Her voice softened slightly. But it is a large bed, Mr. Beaumont, and the nights are cold. We can manage civility for one evening. So they did. They dressed separately, climbed into opposite sides of the bed, maintained a careful distance in the darkness. Thad lay awake for a long time listening to her breathe, wondering what morning would bring, wondering if Sterling Vandermeer was already planning his next move, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or the first right decision in years. In the darkness, Genevieve's voice came quietly. Thank you for listening. You are my wife, Thad said. I may not have chosen this, but I will not abandon it. Silence, then so soft he almost missed it. Perhaps there is hope for us yet. Thad did not answer, but he thought maybe impossibly she might be right. Outside the wind picked up. The old estate creaked and settled, and somewhere in the night a storm was building. One that would arrive sooner than either of them expected. Morning light came cold through the windows of Beaumont Estate in Vermont. Thad woke to find the other side of the bed empty. The sheets were cool. Genevieve had been up for hours. He found her in the estate library surrounded by ledgers. She sat at the massive oak desk that had belonged to his grandfather, his father to every Beaumont man for 100 years. Her hair was pinned back severely. She wore a simple gray dress, practical and unadorned, reading glasses perched on her nose. The estate account books lay open in front of her. All of them. Thad stopped in the doorway. What are you doing? Genevieve looked up. Her eyes were tired but sharp. Learning what I married into. Those are private. I am your wife. Nothing in this house is private from me anymore. She turned a page. Did you know the staff has not been paid in 3 months? Thad's jaw tightened. I know. And the South tenant farmers are 2 years behind on their leases because the crops failed, and you did not have the heart to evict them. I said I know. Genevieve removed her glasses, studied him. You are a better man than your ledgers suggest, Mr. Beaumont. The ledgers only show what I could not do, not what I wanted to do. She stood crossed to where a stack of papers sat separate from the others. I have made a list. Immediate repairs needed, staff salaries owed, debts that must be paid first to avoid legal action. She handed him the list. My father's money will cover it, but we do this strategically, not as charity, as investment. Thad scanned the list. It was thorough, detailed. She had worked through the night doing calculations he had been too afraid to face. Why am I here? He asked. Because this is my house now too, and I will not live in a place that is falling apart. She moved to the window, looked out at the overgrown gardens. Besides, we will need the staff loyal if Sterling Vandermeer comes. Servants talk. If they are well paid and well treated, they will talk in our favor. Strategy, always strategy with her. I am sending Silas to New York, Thad said. To investigate Vandermeer. Quietly. Genevieve turned. What will he look for? Previous victims. Evidence. Anything that can be used. Thad paused. You said he has done this before. There must be others who would testify. If they are still alive. If they are still sane. Her voice went flat. Men like Vandermeer do not leave witnesses who can hurt them. Then we find the ones he missed. For the first time since the wedding, Genevieve smiled at him. Really smiled. Not the calculated performance for society. Something genuine. Perhaps there is hope for us yet, she said again. The words echoed from last night. A callback. A small bridge being built between them. Silas Brennan left for New York City within the hour. Thad walked him to his carriage in the morning cold. The sky was gray heavy with the promise of rain. What exactly am I looking for? Silas asked, adjusting his coat. Sterling Vandermeer, Wall Street banker, 35 years old, member of the Metropolitan Club. Thad's voice was tight. I need to know everything about him. His business, his habits, and most importantly, any women who have accused him of impropriety. Silas whistled low. That is a dangerous question to ask in the wrong circles. Then ask in the right ones, quietly. This is about your wife. Yes. Silas studied Thad's face. They had known each other since childhood, had survived boarding school together, had gotten drunk together when Thad's father died. There were no secrets between them. She is not what we expected, Silas said carefully. No, she is not. Do you trust her? Thad thought about the question. About the woman currently reorganizing his entire household with ruthless efficiency. About the note and the claws in the careful web she had woven. I trust that she is telling the truth about being hunted, he said finally. Whether I trust her beyond that, I am still deciding. Silas nodded. I will send word as soon as I find anything. The carriage pulled away, wheels crunching on gravel. Thad watched until it disappeared down the tree-lined drive. Then he turned back to the house where his strange wife was remaking his world without asking permission. Genevieve moved through Beaumont Estate like a general surveying a battlefield. Mrs. Caldwell followed her notepad in hand, expression caught between resentment and grudging respect. The east parlor needs new curtains, Genevieve said, running her finger along a windowsill. Dust came away, and a thorough cleaning. When was this room last used? Not since the late Duchess passed, ma'am, 5 years ago. Then it is time to use it again. We will take tea here in the afternoons. Genevieve moved to the next room. The silver in the dining room. How much of it is real? Mrs. Caldwell hesitated. Perhaps half, ma'am. The master sold pieces over the years. I see. Make a list of what was sold. We will replace it. She turned to face the housekeeper directly. Mrs. Caldwell, I know you are skeptical of me. You have served this family for decades. I am an outsider with railroad money and no breeding. The housekeeper's cheeks colored slightly. Ma'am, I would not presume you would, and you should. Genevieve's voice was not unkind. But understand this, I did not marry your master to destroy this house. I married him to save it, and to save myself. Those two goals are not in conflict. Mrs. Caldwell met her eyes. A long moment passed. What do you need from me, ma'am? Loyalty and honesty. If something is broken, I need to know. If the staff is unhappy, I need to know. If strangers come asking questions about me or my husband, I especially need to know. Strangers, ma'am. There may be a man from New York, Sterling Vandermeer. If he comes to this house, you are to alert Mr. Beaumont immediately. You are not to let him pass the gate, not for any reason. Mrs. Caldwell's expression sharpened. Is this man a threat? Yes. No explanation, no softening, just the truth direct and hard. The housekeeper straightened her shoulders. Then he will not pass my door, ma'am. You have my word. Genevieve smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. Now about the staff salaries. The money arrived from New York that afternoon. James Hartwell's bank draft, $400,000. Enough to pay every debt, restore every room, and still have funds remaining. Thad held the paper and felt his hand shake. This was real. The marriage, the bargain, the end of 3 years of sleepless nights, wondering when the creditors would finally take everything. He found Genevieve in the estate office writing letters. It came, he said, holding up the draft. She looked up. Good. Pay the staff first, then the critical repairs, then the creditors who have been most aggressive. You have thought about this. I have thought about little else. She set down her pen. Money is power, Mr. Beaumont, and we will need every bit of power we can gather. Thad sat across from her, the desk between them. Why do I feel like we are preparing for war? Because we are. The certainty in her voice was chilling. You think he will come that soon? I think he will come the moment he hears I have married, the moment his pride is wounded. She folded her hands on the desk. Sterling Vandermeer does not accept defeat. He reframes it as a temporary setback. How long do we have? Days, perhaps a week if we are fortunate. Thad leaned back in his chair, studied this woman who had invaded his life and his home with such complete certainty. What did you do to make him so obsessed? I existed. I was beautiful and young, and my father had money. Her voice was bitter. That is all it takes for men like him. We are objects to be collected, trophies to prove their dominance. Not all men. No, but enough. She met his eyes. You married me for money. That is transactional but honest. Vandermeer wants to own me. There is a difference. The words sat heavy between them. Outside, the threatened rain began to fall. The telegraph came 2 days later. Thad was in the stables checking on a mare with a lame leg when the estate manager found him. Sir, urgent message from New York. The paper trembled slightly in Thad's hand as he read. Vandermeer left NYC. Stop destination Newport. Stop estimated arrival. 2 days stop. Silas, his blood went cold. He found Genevieve in the garden supervising the groundskeeper. She wore a shawl against the autumn chill, her hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment, she looked almost peaceful. Then she saw his face. He is coming, she said, not a question. Silas sent word. 2 days. The color drained from Genevieve's face, but her voice stayed steady. Then we prepare. They walked back to the house together. Thad's mind was already moving through strategies. Defense, protection, what resources they had. I will send for the magistrate, he said. Have him here when Vandermeer arrives. An official presence. He will bring his own officials, men he owns. Then we make sure ours are present too. Thad stopped at the base of the front steps. Genevieve, I need you to tell me everything, every detail about what he did, what he threatened. I need to know what we are facing. She looked up at the house, at the home that was now hers. He told me once that there are worse things than death, that he could make me disappear into an asylum, that he had doctors who would declare me insane for a price. Her voice was very quiet, that I would spend the rest of my life in a white room and no one would ever believe me. Thad felt rage hot and sharp rising in his chest. He will not touch you. He has touched others, made good on those threats. She turned to him. That is why we need more than just defense, Thaddeus. We need offense. We need to destroy him before he destroys us. It was the first time she had used his given name. How? By finding his other victims, by giving them a voice he cannot silence. Her eyes held emerald fire, and by making him answer for his crimes publicly, where his money cannot hide him. That will require evidence. Then we find it. The rain fell harder. They stood in it, water soaking their clothes, and made their plans. Vandermeer arrived on the third day. The carriage was expensive. Black lacquer, gold fittings, pulled by 4 matched grays that probably cost more than most men earned in a year. Thad watched from the library window as it rolled up the drive. Genevieve stood beside him. She had dressed carefully that morning, a high-necked dress in deep blue, her hair pinned back severely, armor disguised as fashion. He will try to get me alone, she said quietly. He will fail. The carriage stopped at the gate. Thomas, the groundskeeper who had served in the war and still carried himself like a soldier, stood blocking the entrance. Thad had given him specific instructions. A man stepped out of the carriage. Sterling Vandermeer was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of polished handsomeness that came from expensive barbers and tailored clothes. His smile was charming. His eyes were cold as winter ice. Even from a distance, Thad could see it, the predator beneath the gentleman. We should go down, Genevieve said. They walked to the front entrance together. Thad could feel her trembling slightly, though her face showed nothing. He took her hand, squeezed it once. She squeezed back. Outside, Vandermeer was speaking to Thomas with exaggerated patience, his voice carried in the cold air. Simply wish to pay my respects to an old friend. Surely that is not unreasonable. Thad stepped out onto the front steps. Genevieve remained just behind him, visible, but protected. Mr. Vandermeer, Thad called. His voice was cold, aristocratic, every inch the Duke his title claimed. This is unexpected. Vandermeer's smile widened. Mr. Beaumont, or should I say your grace, I heard about the happy news and simply had to come congratulate you both. His eyes found Genevieve, locked on. And to see dear Genevieve, of course. It has been too long. Mrs. Beaumont and I are not receiving visitors, Thad said. Surely you can spare a moment for an old family friend. We are not friends, Mr. Vandermeer. Genevieve's voice cut through the air like a blade. We have never been friends. Vandermeer's smile did not waver, but something flickered in his eyes. Anger quickly controlled. Genevieve, darling, I understand you are upset. Your father made decisions without consulting you. But it is not too late. We can still— You are not welcome here, Thad interrupted. This is private property. You are trespassing. I am attempting to save a young woman from a terrible mistake. Vandermeer's voice grew harder. Genevieve, you cannot actually wish to stay married to this bankrupt aristocrat who only wanted your father's money. And what did you want, Mr. Vandermeer? Genevieve stepped forward. Thad tensed, but let her. When you cornered me in the Berkshires, when you told me exactly what you would do to me, what did you want then? The air went very still. Vandermeer's charming mask cracked. Just for a second. Thad saw what lay beneath. Rage, entitlement. The fury of a man told no for perhaps the first time in his life. You misunderstood, Vandermeer said tightly. You were young, confused. I was terrified. There is a difference. Genevieve, Mrs. Beaumont, Thad corrected. And this conversation is over. Leave my property or I will have you removed. Vandermeer looked between them, calculating, assessing. I have friends, Your Grace. Powerful friends. Judge, policemen, men who owe me favors. His voice dropped, became almost gentle, more threatening for its softness. I could make your life very difficult. Both of you, but especially dear Genevieve. There are places for women who become unstable, who make wild accusations. I could have her in one by week's end. Thad descended the steps, slowly. His hand moved to his side instinctively, though he carried no weapon. You just threatened my wife, he said quietly. On my property, in front of witnesses. I made no threat, simply stated facts. Then here are some facts for you. Thad stopped 5 feet from Vandermeer, close enough to see the calculation in the man's eyes. My wife is under my protection. That protection includes the full weight of my family name, my connections, and my resources. If you attempt to harm her, institutionalize her, or spread lies about her, I will destroy you. Publicly. Completely. Am I clear? Vandermeer's smile was thin. You have no idea who you are dealing with. Neither do you. For a long moment they stared at each other. 2 men, 1 fight. Then Vandermeer stepped back. This is not over, Your Grace. Genevieve and I have unfinished business. Goodbye, we have nothing, Genevieve called from the steps. We never did. Vandermeer climbed back into his carriage. But before the door closed, he looked at Genevieve one last time. I will see you again soon, darling. Very soon. The carriage pulled away. Thad watched until it disappeared. Then he turned to find Genevieve gripping the railing so hard her knuckles were white. You were right, he said quietly. He will not stop. No, he will not. Her voice shook just slightly. He will escalate. He always does. Thad climbed the steps, stood beside her. Then we escalate first. She looked at him. How? Silas sent another message this morning. He found 2 of Vandermeer's previous victims, both alive, both willing to talk. Thad pulled the telegram from his pocket. 1 in New York, 1 in Boston. We leave tomorrow to speak with them. And if Vandermeer follows, then we lead him exactly where we want him, to witnesses he cannot silence, to evidence he cannot destroy. Thad met her eyes. You said we needed a fence, so we attack. Genevieve's trembling stopped. Her spine straightened. When do we leave at dawn? She nodded, then impulsively she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Brief, chaste, but genuine. Thank you, she whispered, for believing me. Thad watched her walk back into the house and felt something shift in his chest. This was no longer just about saving his estate or honoring a contract. This was about protecting someone who had been failed by every man who should have protected her before. And he would not fail her too. They took the morning train to New York City. Genevieve wore a simple traveling suit, her hair hidden under a modest hat, trying to be invisible. But even dressed plainly, she drew eyes. Her beauty was not something that could be hidden by fabric. Thad sat across from her in the private compartment, watching the countryside blur past. Tell me about Eleanor Grayson, Genevieve said. Thad pulled out Silas's notes. Age 32, from a good family, old New York money. She made accusations against Vandermeer in 1885. Her family did not believe her. Within a month, she was institutionalized at Bellevue. Diagnosis: hysteria. Of course, Genevieve's voice was bitter. Hysteria, the convenient diagnosis for any woman who speaks uncomfortable truths. She was released 6 months ago. Silas found her living in a boarding house in the Bowery. She works as a seamstress now. Will she help us? Silas thinks so, if we can promise protection. The train rocked on its rails. New York City grew closer with each passing mile. And Margaret Winters, Genevieve asked, lives in Boston, widow, Vandermeer, pursued her from 1883 to 1884. She kept a diary, every incident documented. Thad hesitated. She fled to Boston to escape him, changed her name, but she kept the diary. Why hoss I am? Because she knew someday someone would need proof. Genevieve looked out the window, her reflection ghosted in the glass. We are building an army of broken women. We are building a case. Thad leaned forward. Genevieve, if we do this, if we expose him publicly, there will be no going back. Society will scrutinize you. Your name will be in newspapers. Your father's reputation may suffer. My father chose his reputation over my safety. I no longer care what he suffers. She turned from the window, and my name is already being whispered. At least this way I control the narrative. The train pulled into Grand Central. The city swallowed them whole. Eleanor Grayson's boarding house was in a part of the city where gentlemen did not walk alone at night. The building was narrow, wedged between a butcher and a pawn shop. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation. Silas met them at the door to Eleanor's room. She is frightened, he warned. Took me 3 days to convince her to even speak with me. Thad knocked, gentle, respectful. The door opened a crack. A woman's face appeared. Thin, pale, eyes that had seen too much. Mrs. Grayson, Genevieve said softly. My name is Genevieve Beaumont. May we speak with you, please? Eleanor's eyes locked on Genevieve's face. A long moment, then recognition of something shared, something understood. The door opened wider. The room was small. A single bed, a table with sewing materials. Nothing else. Eleanor Grayson had been stripped of everything except survival. They sat. Eleanor poured tea from a chipped pot. Her hand shook. You are the one he is chasing now, Eleanor said. Not a question. Yes. He came to your father's house, brought flowers, seemed charming. Yes. And when you said no, he did not accept it. No. Eleanor set down her teacup, closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were wet but fierce. He cornered me at a gallery opening, told me I would be his mistress or he would destroy me. I laughed, thought it was empty threat. Her voice cracked. 3 weeks later, my own family had me committed. Vandermeer had paid a doctor to examine me, to declare me hysterical, dangerous to myself. Genevieve reached across the table, took Eleanor's hand. How long were you there? 4 years. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. They did things, Eleanor whispered. Cold baths, restraints, medicines that made me forget who I was. And every 6 months, Vandermeer would visit, would stand outside my door and smile. Remind me that he could release me anytime, if I would just agree to his terms. Thad felt sick. How did you get out? He got bored, moved on to someone else, stopped paying the doctors. They released me because I was no longer profitable. Eleanor looked at Genevieve directly. A women's charity found me, helped me find work and housing, taught me I could survive. She paused. You need to understand, Sterling Vandermeer does not want you because you are beautiful. He wants you because you said no, because you represent the one thing his money cannot simply buy, a will that refuses to bend. I will never bend, Genevieve said. Then he will try to break you, and he has the resources to do it. Not anymore. Thad spoke for the first time. We are going to stop him, publicly, permanently, but we need your testimony. Eleanor's face went pale. Testify against him, no one will believe me. They will if there are multiple witnesses, if there is a pattern. Genevieve squeezed her hand. We are going to Boston tomorrow to speak with Margaret Winters. If she agrees, we will have 3 women, 3 stories, 3 pieces of a puzzle that shows exactly who Sterling Vandermeer is. He will retaliate. Let him try. I have a husband with a title and resources now. You will be protected. Eleanor looked at Thad. Can you promise that truly? Thad met her eyes. On my family name, I promise. He will not touch you again. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Outside, the city rumbled and shouted. Inside, a woman made a choice that would change everything. I will testify, she said finally, but not just for you, for every woman he has destroyed. For Sarah. Genevieve went very still. Sarah Lowell, she was the one before me, the one who, Eleanor's voice broke, the one who did not survive. They left Eleanor's boarding house with a promise to return. Outside, Genevieve stopped in the street, let the crowds flow around her. Tell me about Sarah Lowell, she said to Silas. Silas pulled out his notebook. Age 23 when she died, 1887, ruled a suicide, jumped from the window of Sterling Vandermeer's office building. What was she doing in his office? He claimed she was a clerk, but witnesses said she was terrified of him, had tried to quit multiple times. Was there an investigation? Brief, inconclusive, Vandermeer had an alibi, and the police chief at the time was in his pocket, Genevieve finished. Of course, Thad was already thinking. Where are the records, the death certificate, the police report? City Hall, but getting access without raising suspicion. I do not care about suspicion anymore. Thad looked at Genevieve. If Sarah Lowell's death was not suicide, we need proof. Can you get into City Hall records? Silas hesitated. It would take connections, bribes probably. I have money, use it. They spent the afternoon navigating the labyrinth of New York City bureaucracy. Genevieve used her father's name. Thad used his title. Silas used cash. But getting the records was harder than expected. The first clerk they approached looked nervous. Those files are sealed, sir. By whose authority? I don't know, just marked confidential. Thad exchanged glances with Genevieve. Vandermeer had anticipated this, had protected himself even years later. They tried a different approach. A junior clerk, younger, more desperate for money. Silas slipped him $50. There's a way, the clerk whispered, after hours. But if you're caught, we won't be, Thad said. That night they returned to City Hall. The building was dark. The young clerk let them in through a side entrance. 10 minutes, he hissed. That's all I can give you. They moved quickly through shadowed corridors, found the records room. The clerk's directions were good. Sarah Lowell's file was buried deep, literally. Bottom drawer back of the cabinet underneath files from 1875. Hidden, deliberately. Thad pulled it out. They crowded around reading by lamplight. The death certificate made Genevieve gasp. The doctor who signed this. What? Thad asked. Dr. Marcus Pendleton. He died in 1877, 10 years before Sarah's death. A forged signature, a dead doctor, a covered-up murder. The police report was worse, filled with inconsistencies, witness statements that contradicted each other, and a single detail that made Thad's blood run cold. Bruises on her wrist, he read aloud, consistent with restraint. Genevieve took the paper, read it 3 times. Her hands were shaking. He killed her, she said quietly, and paid everyone to look away. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Close, getting closer. Someone's coming, Silas hissed. Not our clerk. They froze. The footsteps stopped outside the records room door. A voice, gruff, official. Who left this light on? Thad moved fast, grabbed the documents, shoved them inside his coat, extinguished the lamp. Darkness. The door handle turned. They pressed against the wall, barely breathing. A guard entered with a lantern, swept the room with light, came within inches of where they hid. Genevieve's hand found Thad's, squeezed tight. The guard grunted, turned, left. They waited 5 full minutes, then fled. Outside City Hall, gasping in the cold night air, Thad looked at the documents in his hands. We have it, he said. Proof that Sarah Lowell's death was covered up, that the investigation was a sham. Can we use it? Genevieve asked. Not conclusively, but we can raise enough doubt to destroy his reputation. She looked up at Thad. If we go public with this, if we bring Eleanor's testimony and this evidence, Sterling Vandermeer will do everything in his power to silence us. Then we make sure we speak loudly enough that silence is impossible. They took the evening train to Boston. Margaret Winters lived in a narrow house in Beacon Hill. She answered the door herself. A woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed with eyes that had learned to be careful. Mrs. Beaumont, Mr. Brennan said you would come. She stepped aside. Please come in. Her home was modest but tasteful. Books lined the walls. A fire burned in the grate. Margaret served them coffee in delicate china. I knew this day would come, she said, settling into a chair. I have been waiting for someone brave enough to challenge him. Why did you not come forward yourself? Genevieve asked gently. Because I was a coward. Margaret's voice was steady. No self-pity, just fact. After I escaped to Boston, I convinced myself that silence was survival. That if I just stayed hidden, he would forget about me. She pulled a leather-bound book from a drawer, handed it to Genevieve. But I kept this, every incident, every threat, every time he cornered me or touched me or whispered what he would do if I told anyone. Genevieve opened the diary, page after page of neat handwriting, dates, times, locations, a meticulous record of systematic terror. May I read some aloud? Genevieve asked. Margaret nodded. Genevieve read. Her voice stayed steady, but Thad watched the color drain from her face. August 12th, 1883. He followed me home from the theater, told me I would be his or I would be nothing, that he could make me disappear. October 3rd, 1883. He sent flowers to my home, a card that said, soon. My mother thought it was romantic. I was terrified. January 15th, 1884. He cornered me at a charity function, put his hand on my throat, squeezed, said this is how easy it would be, then smiled and walked away as if nothing had happened. Thad stood, paced to the window. His hands were fists. How many entries? He asked without turning. 147, Margaret said quietly, over 18 months, until I finally broke, fled to Boston, changed my name, started over. Did he follow you? For a while, but then he found someone else. Sarah Lowell. The name hung in the air. Margaret stood, walked to a cabinet, pulled out a newspaper clipping, yellow with age. I kept this too. When I read about Sarah's death, I knew. I knew it was not suicide. She handed the clipping to Thad, and I knew that someday he would go too far, that someday someone would stop him. Genevieve looked at Margaret. Will you testify? If it is public. If there are witnesses who cannot be bought. If the risk of silence becomes greater than the risk of speaking. Margaret's voice grew stronger. Then yes, I will testify. I will tell the world exactly who Sterling Vandermeer is. Thad turned from the window. We are going to expose him at a public event, somewhere with enough witnesses that his connections cannot bury the truth. When? Soon, we need time to prepare, to gather everyone, to make sure the exposure is so complete he cannot recover from it. Margaret smiled, thin, hard. I have waited 14 years for this. I can wait a few more weeks. They left Boston that night with Margaret's diary and her promise. On the train back to Beaumont Estate, Genevieve sat across from Thad in the dark compartment. The city lights faded into countryside. We have Eleanor, she said quietly. We have Margaret. We have Sarah's evidence. What do we do with it? Thad had been thinking about that question all day. We need a stage, he said, a public venue where Vandermeer cannot avoid being present, where society will be watching. The Newport Casino, Genevieve said suddenly. The annual ball, 3 weeks from now. He will be invited. He is always invited, old money, important connections. Her eyes gleamed with determination. And the governor attends. The mayor, half of New York society. If we expose him there in front of everyone, he cannot make it disappear. He will be prepared. We'll have lawyers, police. Then we bring the magistrate, the one in Newport who is not corrupt. Genevieve leaned forward. We make it so public, so undeniable that even his money cannot save him. Thad studied her face in the lamplight. This woman who had been hunted and terrorized but refused to break, who had built a strategy out of desperation and turned it into a weapon. You are extraordinary, he said. She blinked, surprised. I am practical. No, you are extraordinary. He reached across the space between them, took her hand, and I am honored to fight beside you. For a moment, Genevieve just looked at him. Then she squeezed his hand. Together, she said, together. But when they arrived home at Beaumont Estate, reality was waiting. A letter on Thad's desk, unmarked, expensive paper. He opened it. 3 words in elegant script. She will scream. Below it, a pressed flower, the same kind Vandermeer had sent to Margaret, to Eleanor, to Sarah. A calling card, a promise. The war had begun, and Vandermeer was not waiting for the ball. The next 3 weeks were a siege. Week 1 brought legal threats, a letter from Vandermeer's lawyer claiming Genevieve was mentally unstable and should be committed for evaluation. Thad's lawyer responded with a countersuit for slander. Week 2 brought physical intimidation. 3 men hired thugs tried to break into the estate at night. Thomas and 2 other groundskeepers fought them off. One attacker was injured badly enough to talk before fleeing. Vandermeer sent us, said to scare the lady, make her know she's not safe. Thad had the man arrested, but he was released within hours. Vandermeer's connections at work. Week 3 brought the social campaign. Rumors began circulating in Newport society. Whispers that Genevieve was having episodes, that she was violent, unstable, that she made wild accusations against respected gentlemen. Mrs. Caldwell reported every visitor who came asking questions. Every servant approached with offers of money for information. Genevieve grew quieter, more focused. She worked with Eleanor and Margaret by correspondence preparing their testimonies. She reviewed the evidence again and again, made lists, strategies, backup plans. Thad watched her armor herself in preparation. One evening, a week before the ball, he found her in the library, staring at Clause 9 of their marriage contract. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Reading the only protection I have left." Her voice was tired. "If anything happens to me, if he manages to have me committed, this clause ensures I can still control enough assets to hire lawyers, to fight back." Thad sat beside her, took the contract from her hands. "You will not need this," he said firmly. "You cannot promise that." "Yes, I can." He met her eyes. "Because I will not let him take you. Not to an asylum, not anywhere. You are my wife, Genevieve, and I protect what is mine." She stared at him. "When did this stop being a transaction for you?" "Somewhere between the wedding and now. Somewhere between watching you rebuild my world and preparing to destroy a monster." He touched her face gently. "I do not know when. But it stopped being business the moment I understood what you had survived alone." Genevieve's eyes filled. "I am afraid." "So am I. But we go anyway. We go anyway." She leaned into him, let herself be held. For the first time since the wedding, she let her armor crack. "What if we fail?" she whispered. "Then we fail together, and we try again." He held her tighter. "But we will not fail, Genevieve, because you are too stubborn to lose, and I am too stubborn to let you." She laughed, short, wet, but genuine. "Perhaps there is hope for us yet," she said for the third time. And this time Thad believed it. 4 days before the Newport Casino ball, Thad received a telegram. It was from Silas, still in New York City. "Found seventh victim. Stop alive and willing to testify. Stop name Helena Vandermeer. Stop his mother. Stop." Thad read it 3 times. His hand shook. Vandermeer's own mother. He found Genevieve in the garden cutting roses for the house. The autumn air was crisp, beautiful, deceptive in its peace. "We have another witness," he said, "the most devastating one yet." She turned. "Who?" "His mother." The pruning shears fell from Genevieve's hands. They took the train to New York that afternoon. Helena Vandermeer lived in a townhouse in Washington Square. Old money, older than her sons. The house was elegant but cold, like a mausoleum. She answered the door herself. No servants. A woman in her 60s, beautiful in a faded way with eyes that held oceans of regret. "Mr. Beaumont, Mrs. Beaumont." Her voice was cultured, tired. "Please come in." The parlor was spotless, untouched, as if no one actually lived there. Helena served tea with hands that trembled slightly. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Our investigator is thorough," Thad said carefully, "and persistent." Helena smiled without warmth. "I have been waiting for someone to come, for years. I knew eventually someone would be brave enough to challenge Sterling. I prayed it would happen before he destroyed another life." Genevieve leaned forward. "Mrs. Vandermeer, Silas said you would testify. Is that true?" Helena set down her teacup, met Genevieve's eyes directly. "My son is a monster. I have known it since he was 16 years old." Her voice was steady, certain. "And I have done nothing to stop him. That makes me complicit. That makes me guilty." "What happened when he was 16? Thad asked. Helena closed her eyes. "There was a girl, a maid in our household, 15 years old, sweet child. Sterling." She swallowed hard. "Sterling assaulted her. When she threatened to tell it, he arranged an accident. She fell down the stairs, broke her neck." The room went cold. "Mustn't know. My husband covered it up, paid the family, made it disappear." Helena's hands clenched in her lap. "And I said nothing, did nothing. Let my son learn that money could erase any consequence, any crime." "Why?" Genevieve's voice was barely audible. "Why did you stay silent?" "Because I was a coward. Because I told myself it was one mistake, that he would learn, that protecting the family name mattered more than justice for a poor girl no one would miss." Tears fell down Helena's face. "But it was not one mistake. It was the first of many, and each time I stayed silent. Each time I chose my son over his victims." She looked up at them. "Until I could not anymore. Until the guilt became heavier than the fear." "What changed?" Thad asked. "Sarah Lowell." Helena's voice broke. "I knew her. She came to our home for dinner parties. She was kind to me, and when she died when Sterling came home that night, With scratches on his face and blood on his cuff, I knew. I knew he had killed her. Did you go to the police? I tried. They would not listen. Sterling had already paid them, already constructed his alibi. She stood, walked to a desk, pulled out a leather folder. So I started documenting everything. Every woman he pursued, every threat he made, every time he came home with that look in his eyes that said he had hurt someone. She handed the folder to Genevieve. 12 women? Over 18 years. Some I could help secretly, some I could not. Sarah was the one I failed completely. Genevieve opened the folder. Lists, names, dates. Evidence collected by a mother documenting her son's crimes. This is more than Eleanor and Margaret combined, Genevieve whispered. Because I had access. I heard him boast, saw his victims when he brought them to family events to torment them. Helena's voice hardened. I will testify. I will tell the world what my son is, and I will accept whatever judgment that brings upon me. Why now? Thad asked. Why come forward now? Helena looked at Genevieve. Because I read about your marriage in the papers, saw your photograph, and I knew Sterling would come for you, would try to destroy you as he destroyed the others. And I decided I could not be silent anymore, could not let another woman suffer because I was too afraid to speak. Genevieve stood, crossed to Helena, took the older woman's hands. This will destroy your life, Genevieve said gently. Society will cast you out. Your family name is already destroyed. My son destroyed it years ago. I just refused to see it. Helena squeezed Genevieve's hands. Let me do this. Let me finally do one right thing. They left New York with Helena's testimony and her promise to attend the ball. On the train back, Genevieve was quiet, staring out the window at the darkness. What are you thinking? Thad asked. That even monsters have mothers. That evil is not born, it is made, created by silence and money and people who look away. You will not look away. No, I will not. She turned to him. 3 days until the ball. Are we ready? Thad pulled out his notes. Eleanor arrives tomorrow. Margaret the next day. Helena will come the morning of the ball. Judge Morrison has confirmed his attendance. The magistrate, 3 newspaper editors, the governor. And Vandermeer will be there. Silas confirmed his RSVP yesterday. He thinks he has won, Genevieve said quietly. 3 weeks of harassment, of threats. He thinks I will be too afraid to attend, too broken to fight. Are you, She met his eyes, green fire blazing. No, I am angry, and anger is so much stronger than fear. The day of the ball arrived cold and bright. Beaumont Estate was transformed. Servants moved efficiently, preparations finalized. Eleanor and Margaret had arrived the day before, nervous but determined. Helena Vandermeer arrived that morning in a plain carriage unannounced. She wore black, mourning clothes. For the son I lost years ago, she explained, and the women he destroyed. They gathered in Thad's study, 5 people preparing for war. Eleanor thin and scared but present. Margaret elegant and sharp. Helena regal in her grief. Genevieve armored in emerald silk and determination. And Thad, their general, their anchor. Tonight, Thad said, Sterling Vandermeer will answer for his crimes, in front of 500 witnesses, in front of judges and governors and press. There will be no escape, no bought officials, no convenient disappearances. What if he does not come? Eleanor asked. Her voice was small. He will come. Genevieve's voice was certain. His pride will not let him stay away. He wants to see me broken, wants to prove he won. Instead, he will watch his world burn, Margaret added. Helena stood, placed her hand over Genevieve's. Thank you, the older woman said quietly, for giving me a chance to stop him. Finally. Thank you for being brave enough to try, Genevieve replied. They stood together. 4 women and 1 man, united against a monster. Together, Genevieve said. Together, they echoed. The Newport Casino ballroom gleamed. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into rainbows. Flowers cascaded from every surface. The orchestra tuned instruments in the corner. 500 guests arrived in silk and diamonds, the cream of American society. And somewhere among them was Sterling Vandermeer. Thad adjusted his white tie for the 3rd time. His hands were steadier than he expected. Genevieve appeared in the doorway of their dressing room. She wore emerald green silk that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was swept up, exposing her neck. Around her throat, the emerald necklace. Vandermeer's necklace. You are wearing it, Thad observed. I want him to see it. Want him to think he still has power. Her smile was sharp. Let him be comfortable, confident. It will make the fall so much harder. You are terrifying. I am tired of being afraid. There is a difference. A knock at the door. Silas entered, looking uncomfortable in formal wear. Eleanor and Margaret are in position, East Parlor with Judge Morrison. Helena is with the governor's party. The press is seated where they can see everything. He paused. Vandermeer arrived 10 minutes ago. Thad felt his pulse quicken. How does he look? Confident, smug. He brought a lawyer and two men who looked like hired muscle. Expected. Thad pulled a small case from his desk. Inside his father's dueling pistol. He tucked it into his jacket. Genevieve took his hand. It ends tonight. It ends tonight, he agreed. They descended to the ballroom together. The guests began arriving at 8. Carriages lined the drive. Society in all its gilded glory. They came to see and be seen, to gossip and judge. They had no idea they were about to witness a reckoning. Thad and Genevieve stood in the receiving line greeting each arrival. Governor Russell clasped Thad's hand warmly. Beaumont, magnificent event. The papers will be talking about this for weeks. He had no idea how right he was. Judge Morrison arrived. Mayor Grant, the Newport magistrate, each carefully vetted by Silas, each honest, incorruptible. And then at 8:30, Sterling Vandermeer entered. He moved through the ballroom like he owned it. Immaculate evening dress, charming smile. He worked the crowd with practiced ease. His eyes found Genevieve immediately, locked on the emeralds around her throat. His smile widened. Thad felt Genevieve tense beside him. He touched her elbow gently. Remember the plan, he murmured. I remember. Vandermeer crossed the ballroom toward them. The crowd parted automatically. Power recognized power. Your Grace, he said to Thad. Mrs. Beaumont. His eyes never left Genevieve's face. How lovely you look tonight, and wearing my gift. I am honored. Mr. Vandermeer, Genevieve's voice was cool as winter. How unexpected to see you here. Unexpected. My dear, I would not miss this for the world. He gestured to the ballroom. Such a magnificent event, and hosted by you. Tell me, does marriage suit you? Better than expected. Something flickered in Vandermeer's eyes. Uncertainty quickly masked. Indeed, the orchestra began. A waltz. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Vandermeer extended his hand. Dance with me, Genevieve. One last time. We have never danced. Then for first and last, his voice dropped, took on an edge. I would hate for your husband's evening to be ruined by unpleasantness. Dance with me, and perhaps we can avoid such things. It was a threat, veiled but clear. Genevieve looked at Thad. He nodded slightly. This was the plan. Let Vandermeer think he had control. One dance, Genevieve said. She took his hand and allowed him to lead her onto the floor. Thad watched them go, every muscle in his body screaming to intervene. Silas appeared at his elbow. Eleanor and Margaret are moving into position near the governor's table. Helena is ready. The press is watching. This is it. And if something goes wrong, then we improvise, like we always do. On the dance floor, Vandermeer pulled Genevieve close, too close. His hand on her waist was possessive. Other couples gave them space, perhaps sensing the tension, perhaps recognizing that something was happening beneath the surface of this dance. Thad moved closer, close enough to hear. Vandermeer's breath was hot against Genevieve's ear. Did you really think this marriage would protect you? He whispered as they turned. That a title and a bankrupt estate would be enough. I think you underestimate what protection means, Genevieve said. Her voice was steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. I have judges who will declare you insane, doctors who will commit you, police who will look the other way. His hand tightened on her waist. Painful. I could have you in an asylum by morning, just like Eleanor Grayson. Genevieve did not stumble this time, did not show surprise. You should not have mentioned Eleanor's name, she said quietly. Why, what can she do? No one believes mad women. They turned again. Genevieve could see Eleanor standing near the governor's table, could see Margaret beside her, could see Helena Vandermeer in her black mourning dress, watching her son with eyes full of sorrow. This was the moment. Genevieve pulled back from Vandermeer's grip. Her voice rang out, clear, loud enough for every nearby dancer to hear. You mean like you threatened Eleanor Grayson before you had her institutionalized for 4 years? Like you terrorized Margaret Winters until she fled to Boston? Like you murdered Sarah Lowell and called it suicide? The music stumbled, faltered, stopped. The ballroom went silent. Every eye turned to them. Vandermeer's face went white, then red. You are hysterical. I am not hysterical. I am telling the truth. Genevieve raised her voice, spoke to the entire room. This man is a predator. He hunts women, terrorizes them, destroys them when they refuse his advances. And he has been doing it for years. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shocked whispers. Vandermeer grabbed her arm. "Shut your mouth." Eleanor Grayson stepped forward from near the governor's table. Her voice shook but held. "He did it to me in 1885. When I refused him, he had me committed to Bellevue. 4 years I spent there. 4 years of torture. Because I said no to Sterling Vandermeer." Another woman stepped forward, Margaret Winters. Her voice was stronger. "He stalked me for 18 months, threatened me, assaulted me. I have documented every incident. 147 entries in my diary. Would you like me to read them? Mr. Vandermeer." The crowd erupted. Shocked exclamations. Women clutching their fans. Men murmuring. Vandermeer's mask shattered. "These women are liars. Mad women with grudges." "Then how do you explain this?" Thad stepped onto the dance floor. Held up documents. Sarah Lowell's death certificate. The police report. "We have proof that Sarah Lowell's death certificate was signed by a doctor who died 10 years before she did. We have evidence that the police investigation was a sham, that witness statements were fabricated." Judge Morrison stood, his voice grave. "These are serious accusations. They are serious crimes," Thad said. "Assault, unlawful imprisonment, murder." And then Helena Vandermeer stepped forward. The crowd gasped. Everyone knew who she was, Sterling's mother, society matriarch. She walked to the center of the ballroom, stood before her son. "Sterling," she said quietly, "I can no longer protect you." "Mother," Vandermeer's voice cracked. "Mother, what are you doing?" "What I should have done 30 years ago." Helena's voice broke. "When you hurt that maid, when you killed her, I should have stopped you then." The ballroom went deathly silent. Helena turned to face the crowd. "My son learned cruelty from his father, and he perfected it under my silence. I have documented 12 women he has terrorized over 18 years. Some he institutionalized. Some he drove to madness. One he murdered." Tears fell down her face. "And I said nothing, did nothing. Let money and fear make me complicit in every crime. But I will not be silent anymore." She looked at Vandermeer. "I am sorry, Sterling, but I will not let you destroy another life." Vandermeer backed away, his charming mask completely shattered. What remained was pure rage. "You cannot do this. I am your son. You were my son. The boy I knew died years ago. What stands before me now is a monster I helped create." Vandermeer lunged toward Genevieve. "You bitch! This was your plan." Thad moved between them, his fist connected with Vandermeer's jaw. The crack echoed through the silent ballroom. Vandermeer hit the floor, blood on his lips. "You do not speak to my wife that way," Thad said quietly. "Deadly. You do not threaten her, you do not touch her, and you do not escape justice." Judge Morrison stepping forward. "Sterling Vandermeer, you are under arrest for assault conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and suspicion of murder in the death of Sarah Lowell." Two policemen, carefully selected by Silas for their honesty, stepped forward. They pulled Vandermeer to his feet, locked handcuffs around his wrists. Vandermeer looked around the ballroom, at the horrified faces, the reporters scribbling frantically, the governor watching with cold eyes, and standing beside the governor, James Hartwell. Genevieve's father stepped forward, opened a leather portfolio. "As of this morning, Mr. Vandermeer, I have purchased every one of your outstanding debts, your railroad investments, your property mortgages, your shipping contracts." He handed papers to Judge Morrison. "You are bankrupt, completely, publicly. By tomorrow morning, every newspaper in America will know." Vandermeer's legs nearly gave out. "You cannot. I already did. The paperwork is filed. The transaction's complete." James looked at his daughter. "I failed to protect you before Genevieve. I will not fail again." The police led Vandermeer toward the exit. He screamed, struggled, promised revenge that would never come. The ballroom doors closed, and his voice faded. Then Governor Russell began to clap, slowly at first. Then others joined, women especially. A standing ovation that built and built until the entire ballroom thundered with applause. For the women who had spoken, for the truth that had been told, for justice finally served. Genevieve stood in the center of it all, trembling. Thad took her hand, pulled her close. "You did it," he murmured. "We did it," she corrected. Eleanor and Margaret and Helena joined them, 4 women who had fought a monster in one. The press surged forward with questions, but Silas and Thomas, the groundskeeper, formed a protective wall. "Mrs. Beaumont will make a statement tomorrow," Silas announced. "Tonight, let these women breathe." The trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom was packed every day, press from across the country, society, women who had suffered in silence, and finally saw hope for justice. Eleanor testified first. Her voice grew stronger each day as she described her ordeal. The asylum, the torture, Vandermeer's visits. Margaret testified second, read from her diary. 147 incidents of stalking, threats, assault. The courtroom sat in horrified silence. Genevieve testified third, told of Vandermeer's pursuit, his threats, his attempt to destroy her reputation when she refused him. And then Helena Vandermeer took the stand. She was the most devastating witness of all, a mother testifying against her son, documenting not just Sterling's crimes but her own complicity. The maid he killed at 16, the women he terrorized in his 20s and 30s, the pattern of abuse she had witnessed and hidden. I am as guilty as he is, Helena said, her voice steady, because I chose silence over justice, chose family reputation over the lives of innocent women. If this court sees fit to charge me as well, I will accept that judgment. The prosecutor declined to charge Helena. But the court of public opinion was less forgiving. She was ostracized from society. Her name removed from charity boards. Invitations stopped. She accepted it all with quiet dignity. The defense tried everything: character assassination, claims of conspiracy, accusations that the women were lying for attention or money. But the evidence was overwhelming. The diary, the forged death certificate, the testimony of a mother willing to destroy her own legacy to stop her son. The verdict came on a cold December morning. Guilty on all counts: assault, unlawful imprisonment, a conspiracy to commit fraud, and accessory to murder in the death of Sarah Lowell. 20 years in prison, no possibility of parole. Sterling Vandermeer screamed as they led him away, promised revenge, swore he would destroy them all. But the courtroom doors closed on his threats, and he was gone. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor Grayson stood in the winter sun, breathing free air. "It is really over?" she asked. "It is over," Genevieve said. Margaret Winters wiped tears from her eyes. "Sarah can rest now." Helena Vandermeer stood apart from the others, alone. Genevieve walked to her. "What will you do now?" Genevieve asked gently. "I have purchased a small house in Connecticut. I will live quietly, away from society." Helena looked at Genevieve. "And I will donate what remains of my fortune to the shelter you are building. It is the least I can do." "It is not your fault." "It is." Helena's voice was firm. "I chose silence. Now I will choose atonement, however long it takes." She walked away, a woman carrying the weight of decades of silence, of crimes she did not commit but allowed to happen. Genevieve watched her go, feeling a complex mix of pity and respect. "Come," Thad said softly. "Let us go home." 6 months later, spring came to Beaumont Estate. The gardens bloomed wild and beautiful. The cracked walls were repaired. The staff was paid and content. The estate that had been dying was alive again. Genevieve stood in what had been a forgotten east parlor. Now it was something else. Architectural plans spread across a table. Budget projections, contractor estimates. "The Sarah Lowell Women's Shelter," she read aloud, "opening September 1890. Eleanor Grayson, now the shelter's managing director, pointed to the blueprints. "We can house 20 women initially, provide food, legal aid, job training. Give them a chance to rebuild." "My father's foundation will fund it," Genevieve said. "Permanently. No woman should have to choose between safety and poverty." Margaret Winters, who had moved from Boston to help run legal services, added, "We have received over 40 applications already. Women who heard about the trial, who finally have hope that someone will believe them." Thad entered the room carrying a telegram. "Helena Vandermeer has donated another 50,000. The construction can begin next month." Genevieve smiled. "Then we build." Eleanor looked at Genevieve with shining eyes. "Thank you for giving us a chance to turn our pain into purpose. You gave yourselves that chance by being brave enough to speak." After Eleanor and Margaret left, Thad pulled Genevieve into the garden, where spring flowers bloomed in defiant color. "There is something I need to tell you," Genevieve said. "What?" "I am with child." Thad stopped walking, stared at her. "You are certain?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "In 7 months you will be a father." For a moment he could not speak, could not process the enormity of it. A child, a future, something beyond survival and war. "What should we name her?" he asked finally. Her bio, I have a feeling." Genevieve leaned into him. "If it is a girl, Sarah, for the one we could not save. And if it is a boy, something strong, something that speaks of hope. She paused. What about Thomas after the man who protected us when Vandermeer's thugs came? Thomas Beaumont. Thad tested the name. I like it. They walked through the garden together, past roses and new growth. The estate that had been crumbling was restored. The marriage that had been a transaction was becoming something extraordinary. Do you regret it? Thad asked. The scandal, the trial, your name in every newspaper across the country. No. Genevieve's answer was immediate. Because we changed something. The world is listening now. To women, to truth. 7 states are investigating asylum practices because of Eleanor's testimony. 3 have already passed reform laws. Your father is proud of you. My father learned that money cannot buy safety. Only truth and courage can. She squeezed Thad's hand. Did I tell you he wants to endow 5 more shelters? Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, Chicago, and San Francisco. He is trying to atone. Perhaps, or perhaps, he finally understands what protecting a daughter actually means. They reached a stone bench overlooking the estate, sat together watching the sun paint everything gold. Thank you, Genevieve said quietly. For what? For standing with me, for believing me when no one else did. You gave me something worth standing for. She lifted her head, looked at him. What purpose? Beyond saving buildings or titles or names, you showed me what it means to fight for something that matters, for someone who matters. He kissed her then, in the garden where new things grew, where the future was being built from the ashes of a desperate bargain. When they pulled apart, Genevieve was crying, but smiling too. I love you, Thaddeus Beaumont. I love you, Genevieve Beaumont. It was the first time they had said it, but it would not be the last. 1 year later, the Newport Casino hosted another ball, but this one was different, not for society gossip or political maneuvering, for charity, for the Sarah Lowell Women's Shelter Network. Genevieve stood at the entrance in a dress of deep sapphire, her daughter Sarah in her arms. 10 months old, dark auburn hair and emerald eyes just like her mother's, named for the woman who had not survived but whose death had changed everything. Eleanor Grayson managed 6 shelters now across the East Coast. Margaret Winters ran the legal aid program that had helped over 300 women escape dangerous situations. The ballroom was packed. Governor Russell attended, senators, judges, and hundreds of women who had found safety through the shelter network. Thad stood beside Genevieve, one hand on her waist, the other touching his daughter's soft hair. It is a far cry from our wedding night, he murmured. When you thought I was hideous and I thought you would cage me, exactly that. Genevieve laughed. The sound was lighter than it had been a year ago, freer. The orchestra began, but before they could dance, James Hartwell approached. He looked older, softer somehow. Holding his granddaughter had changed him. May I? He asked, gesturing to Sarah. Genevieve handed over her daughter, watched her father cradle the baby with surprising gentleness. She looks like you, Hartwell said. Strong, determined. She looks like hope, Genevieve corrected. Hartwell met his daughter's eyes. I am sorry for not believing you, for choosing my reputation over your safety. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. You are doing that. The shelters, the foundation. 300 women have safety because you chose to help. Because you showed me how. Thad took Genevieve's hand, led her to the dance floor, the same floor where she had exposed Sterling Vandermeer, where evil had been named and justice served. But tonight there were no monsters, only music and light and a future being built one brave woman at a time. What are you thinking? Thad asked as they waltzed. That I was so afraid of being signed, so certain that marriage meant losing myself. She looked up at him, but I found myself instead, found purpose and partnership and love. Yes, love. The music swelled. Other couples joined them on the floor. Eleanor dancing with Silas Brennan, who had courted her with patience and respect. Margaret with her new husband, a professor from Harvard, who loved her mind as much as her courage. Even Helena Vandermeer attended, quietly, in the back. No longer ostracized entirely but accepted in limited circles. Her penance ongoing, her commitment to the shelter network absolute. Women who had survived, who had spoken, who had changed the world by refusing to be silent. The press covered the event. But this time the headlines were different. Beaumont Shelter Network expands to 10 cities. Women's Safety Initiative saves 500 lives. Justice served 12 more abusers convicted following Vandermeer trial. In a cell at Sing Sing prison, Sterling Vandermeer read those headlines, screamed his rage, promised vengeance that would never come. He died there 5 years later, alone, forgotten. The monster reduced to a cautionary tale. But in cities across America, women found safety in shelters that bore Sarah Lowell's name. And in Beaumont Estate, a family grew. 3 more children after Sarah, a house filled with laughter and purpose and love. A marriage that had begun as survival and became a partnership that transformed the world. On the evening of their 10th anniversary, Thad found Genevieve in the library, the same room where she had first reorganized his ledgers, where she had shown him that marriage could be more than a contract. She was looking at a portrait that hung above the fireplace, commissioned for the shelter's 10th anniversary. It showed 4 women, Eleanor, Margaret, Helena, and in the center, painted from descriptions and photographs, Sarah Lowell, young, alive, the woman who had been destroyed but not forgotten. Below the portrait, a bronze plaque read, "What do you think?" Genevieve asked as Thad joined her. "I think Sarah would be proud of you, of all of you." Genevieve took his hand, laced their fingers together. "We did not save her, but we saved others in her name, and we keep saving them. You saved yourself first. That is what made everything else possible." She turned to face him. 10 years married, 4 children, a foundation that spanned 20 cities, and eyes that still held that sharp emerald fire he had fallen in love with. "No," she said softly, "we saved each other." And in that quiet moment in the library of Beaumont Estate, Thaddeus Beaumont realized something profound. He had thought marrying Genevieve would save his estate, his legacy, his name. But she had saved something far more important. She had saved his heart. And in doing so, they had saved hundreds of others. The veil had lifted, the truth had been told, and justice finally had prevailed.